Crossing things off the list. Airplane mode. Zoom is recording. My Zoom
Awesome.
recorder is recording.
I'm about to turn mine. Okay.
If I don't keep a checklist, then I'm done.
Yeah, something will slip.
Yep, too many things to think about. So
yeah,
man, very excited. My guest today is Dr. John Gaines. It's the heart of Tacoma. Dr. John Gaines, welcome.
Great to be here. Great to be here again. How many returning guests do you have? How many tea time?
Only a handful. Okay. Only a handful, and I would say they're all on the Jeremy Mills podcast, Mount Rushmore, if that's a thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely honored. So thank you,
man. You making the time, I'm very honored. So I know how much spending time with your family means to you, and how much you get after it. So taking this amount of time out is always something I appreciate.
Yeah, of course.
So for the people who are wondering, we kind of got to catch up, but for the people who haven't heard from you since last time, which was like a year ago, almost to the day, funny enough.
Yeah.
How is everything? How's the family?
Yeah. So similar to a lot of people in the world right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And so it's been a unique time. And just speaking of family, we were scheduled to, I'm a storyteller, so this by now. So I'm going to open up with a story, but we were scheduled to record yesterday. Then my wife and my daughter were just a little under the weather. And so I decided just to reach out, which I hate to do, and ask to reschedule. Because one, I learned maybe about 6 or 7 years ago when I started to take off with some of the speaking and some of the entrepreneurship endeavors that family has got to be my priority. And that came about to me in a weird way, because I finally had achieved something that I was working so hard toward. I was able to attend this conference with some of the best youth speakers in the world. And I was actually on a panel. It was like the last session of this conference. And I was on a panel as like the up and coming young guy in the game. They wanted to know what kind of strategies have you implemented in your business to take off? What kind of strategies have you implemented in your life to really take off in the speaking world? And I remember hearing all these great things from amazing speakers. And these are guys that you see on the viral videos, across our social media, right? And I'm just like taking it in, like, wow, I don't even like believe I'm here right now. And I was the second to last guy to speak. And, I said, my strategy is to keep my family first. And they said, well, explain that. I said, well, for me, I can get up here and tell these young speakers coming up of some things they can implement in their business. Some of them married, some of them not. But I want to just encourage you all and encourage you with this, like, keep your family a priority, because that's your first. I grew up in the church, and my grandfather would say, that's my first ministry, my family, and the church is my second. So I kind of took that same approach. It's like my family is my first priority. They're my first ministry. And then everything else is second. Right. And I kind of shared that and just how my family like fills my cup. And so for me, I want to be able to protect and lead my family, because if I can't lead my family, it's impossible for me to lead others. Right. It's impossible for me to give others advice. And so it has to start at home. And this was before I was married. I think I had just met my wife. We were dating. I knew she was the one. I didn't have a daughter. And so I shared those strategies, business strategies, and the guy next to me teared up. Incredible speaker, speaking over 250 times a year. And he said, man, I was going to share something, but I want to talk about what John, I wasn't a doctor at the time. I want to talk about what John shared. And he said, what he said is so important. He said, because I was so busy on the grind for 15 years, I was speaking over 250 times. He said, after one trip, I came home, saw my wife, and, gave her a hug, woke up and said, babe, I love you. And she looked at me with a different stare and said, I love you too, but I'm no longer in love with you. He said, and now I'm divorced. I have all the success in the world. He started some of those viral trends before they were like viral trends. And he said, and here I am on this stage as a man that is not necessarily empty, but kind of trying to refigure it out. And he just said, so I just want to emphasize what he shared. It's important. And that pierced my heart. It really pierced my heart to hear someone who's like a giant in the youth speaking arena kind of open up on stage, not prompted, just something he wasn't planning on sharing, just kind of came with tears in his eyes. I could feel like that emotion. I could feel his pain. And I said, I'd never, and obviously marriage isn't perfect. Like relationship is not perfect, but I said, I'd never want to be in that position. And so that's a long way of answering the question, how's my family? I hope they're good. And I hope they're good because I'm good. And what I mean by that is that I keep them a priority, right? I know how to fill my cup and then I fill their cups. And then that gives me the energy to go out and do everything else I'm doing. And so even me um, canceling and rescheduling, and that's why I'm able to make decisions like that. Although I do not like it at all, but I'm able to make decisions in that way
Right.
because I know, like, if my family needs me, if I said I'm only going to do this if I keep my family, like, that's a commitment to myself. I can't lie to myself. I have to keep that commitment to myself. And so decisions like that are, that's how I make those decisions. And that's why for me, the pandemic, yeah, there's been some hard days, there's been some difficult days. It hurts to see people hurting. I've had family get sick during this pandemic, race relations, and everything in between. But for me, being able to be in the midst of it with my family has been the joy of it all.
Wow. Dr. Gaines, man, that's an opener. That is an opener. So I could go a few different ways with this. First, it all kind of hits home with this essentially, though, is you're a first generation, like you didn't get to see necessarily a happy home in your situation. You didn't get to see what you are putting together now. So, not that you never ever saw that, but you got to see it a lot less than a lot of people who aren't able to make those same, set the priorities like that and really stick to them. And especially when you're an entrepreneur type, you're not working for somebody that's saying work this amount, yada yada. So you want to be successful. You see everyone around you. You see some very successful people around you. You have that mentality to be successful. So a lot of the times that leads to, man, I just didn't get to spend enough time with my family. I like that guy you're talking about. Mm-hmm. He had all the success, but he didn't. There was a sacrifice there, which you do have to sacrifice a lot of things, but like you've set your boundaries in a way. So again, I guess for me, a long-winded way of saying, like, how did you learn that? And for people out there who are in a similar situation to you, like, what advice would you have for them to implement it the way you did? Because the words are easy to say now that you've done it, but like there's a lot of work that goes into that to make it a true statement.
Yep, that makes sense. And so for me, fortunately, I had some brothers who were able to get married and start to break that cycle. And so I was able to kind of watch them. I've always been a learner, right? And so anyone that has questions about anything, leadership, relationships, whatever that is, there's so many people that do it well. Although you might not, and I wasn't able to see that from my parents, but I had others like my brothers, and there was mentors and people I could read about that had great and incredible marriages and had great family life, right? And so for me, understanding what my gift is, it all started with my gift. And I believe every person is born with a gift, right? And so for me, one of my gifts is to learn. And a lot of people have those gifts, and it's something that I used to take for granted. Like, oh man, there's so many guys that, like, I'm not the most gifted communicator. And I share that with people all the time.
Man, right? I don't know about that. I don't object to many things here, but I might have to object to that.
So for me, it's just about the first thing, finding people around you and understanding you don't have to be like the things that you see right in front of you, but being able to look beyond what's in front of you because it's out there, right? Although your circumstance or current circumstance might not be the best, there's people out there that are great at it. And whatever that is, I'm speaking kind of like at a high level, just whatever that might be, there's people out there that are great at it. So find those people. And that's what I did, man. I would read and literally research, whether that be like on mentorship, relationships, leadership. And it's something I still do until this day, because literally fear is the absence of knowledge, right? And so for me, people fear what they don't know. And so a lot of times people, I'm not getting married. They just don't know, because they never saw a good marriage. Mm-hmm. They don't know that great marriages exist. I'm not going to try the entrepreneurship thing. They hear like the horror stories, or you're never going to spend time with your family. You're not going to make any money. They hear the horror stories from entrepreneurship, whatever. Like, I'm not going to college. You're just going to be in debt, or, and so whatever it is, that's just fear, right? And fear is birthed from a place of not knowing. And so I'm really grateful for the gift that I have just to learn. And because it kind of happened organically, where I would read and learn, and the more knowledge I obtained, the less fear I had to make decisions, the less fear I had to be everything that I was created to be in this life. And I truly believe one of those gifts is to be a learner, and then that other gift is really just to be a great husband and a great father. And then everything else kind of falls into place from that. And I can keep going about this idea of a gift, but for me, those are the two things really that I would encourage anyone with. One, look beyond your circumstance, right? It's out there, and then just fall in love with learning, right? Because knowledge is important, and the opposite of knowledge, in my opinion, a lot of is fear.
Mm-hmm.
People they use faith and fear. They say the opposite. Faith and fear, but for me, it's knowledge and fear. The more knowledge, the less fear. The more knowledge, the more confidence. So,
you mentioning your family and your wife, did you realize the impact of a good partner for people, whether it's, their wife or their husband, before you had it? 'Cause I definitely didn't, the impact that they can have, and just the way they can change your thinking and life and things like that.
Yeah, so I was able to see one of my brothers. They're both married now, but the brother that was married before, he was able to build such a dope relationship and like a partnership, and I've never seen it done that way, where they kind of made each other better, and that was so inspiring to me. Obviously, no relationships are perfect, right? Um, and so you pull the good from relationships, and it's not necessarily bad things, but couples find you just do what works for you, right? So if my wife and I say we love to go on walks, on the beach, some other couple might like, that's terrible. Like, I don't want to, that's terrible. Who wants to walk? Like, we want to go, whatever it is, right? So pulling out the good, the things that you're kind of attracted to. And that was one thing I was really attracted to from just my brother and his wife. And that really helped me see that, like, I could find someone that compliments me, right? And so for me, for so much of my life, I was thinking of I was with like a younger relative, and they were talking about the song Pigeons and Scrubs. Y'all know I don't want no scrubs.
Yeah,
And then there was like a remake with some guys came out, no pigeon. So anyway, I'm thinking about this idea of pigeons, right? And not calling women pigeons, just this idea of the pigeon versus the eagle, or the chicken. My grandfather used to say the chicken and the eagle, right? And this is something I always talk about, because I believe when you realize that you were created to be an eagle, you begin to elevate. And when you're 3-4 miles in the air, the only other bird you will see is an eagle, because other birds can't fly that high. So for me, it was one, again, going back to my first model, seeing couples that I really appreciated and pulling out things to kind of look for in my own, like, for my own relationship in the future. And then like growing myself and believing in myself and having confidence and obtaining knowledge and kind of walking in my purpose. And as I began to elevate, I knew that whoever God had for me, whoever I was going to meet, that person was going to be at that altitude. Like, I wasn't going to come back down and find her. I knew, and I just trusted my process, that person would also be, because I knew when I'm 3-4 miles in the air, and not in an arrogant way, just walking in my purpose. And I believe we all, whoever listens to this podcast, I believe all people have the potential to elevate to that level. And then when you do, you're going to run into other people, association, your friends, your whoever it is, that are also operating at that level. So for me, it was really about not necessarily looking for the right things in the right person. It was like looking for the things like in myself, and then having the courage to actually elevate and trusting that I'll meet the person once I elevate. So
that made me think, for some reason, as you talked, made me want to ask, where are the doubters in your life? Because you, I don't know, you run it how many times out of 10 with 10 random people? How many times do they end up where you are right now? Like, I have this question about the keynote address at the Tacoma's annual MLK event.
Yeah, I was talking to the executive director of the Tacoma Rescue Mission a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the ACE score. And if you're not familiar with it, just adverse childhood experiences. And essentially, it's there's like a movie on it now, a lot of research behind it, and essentially what it is, if there it's a score from 1 to 10, right? And if the higher the score, the more likely you are. Basically, it's that kind of test. So the higher the score, if you score above like a 4 or 5, the more likely you are to end up obese. The more likely you are to end up, divorced. The more likely you are to end up with mental illness. The more likely you are. The reason why I was talking to the executive director of the Tacoma Rescue Mission Homeless Outreach Center, the more likely you are to end up homeless or addicted to drugs. And I remember taking that test, and I literally scored a 9 on the test, right? And that's just anytime people score a 9 or 10, it's like no hope for that person based on the statistics. For me, the good thing is I didn't take that test until I was like 20, 25. So I already had shaped my own beliefs about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an emotional point for me because I thought about like how many times do young people take these kind of tests, because they're a lot more popular now. Thank the Lord they didn't exist when I was young, right? But how many times do young people take these tests, whoever it is, and then they start believing what others say about them,
mm-hmm.
right? And really, man, I'm thinking like my mind's racing because it's like our attitude, and I get emotional about it. Our attitude, our belief forms our attitude. And so for me, as a young kid, learning to believe in myself, just because I didn't really know, like I was in the midst of chaos.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Like to me, that was norm. I'm like, I'm just going to get through it. Like these obstacles. Yeah. Like my mother passed away. Yeah. My father's not here. Yeah. I have these learning disabilities, but these obstacles are literally making me stronger. I literally could remember like, I'm tough. First, I thought maybe I could be like a gang member and just be tough. I was like, I'm going to be a great football player. Now I'm like walking in my purpose. Like, I don't want to be the best. I just want to help people. And I want to be one of the best at helping people. Like, I don't want to be the best speaker. I don't want to be the best entrepreneur. Like, I just want to, like, when I pass away, I want like my funeral to be packed. And I want people to say, like, he impacted my life. Like, he shared good with me. He shared love with me. Right. And the only reason why I'm able to get in this point is because at a young age, I began to believe. And the more I believed in myself, was the less I believed in what others said about me or what I should be. Right. It's like and that's what you call self-confidence. It's something I teach young people about all the time. The more I believe, the more my attitude changed, the more my self-image changed. And I just didn't know. And now that's unfortunately a lot of kids do know, right? Their situations are a lot different, and they have people always reminding them, you're never going to be nothing. You're going to be just like your father. You're never going to amount to anything. And unfortunately, those are the kids I'm trying to seek. But for me, I think, and there's still hope for those kids. But what it boils down to is one, teaching them, or adults that might be in the situation that never really figured out. It's never too late to start believing, right? It's never too late to start believing. It's never too late to change your attitude, because this is what I believe. You can't change what goes on around you, but you can control what goes on inside of you. And like I said, each of us have that gift, and that gift is just a seed. And regardless of where you're at in your life, like each person still has that seed, and they have the potential to like grow that seed. And so for me, it starts with belief, right? Because belief changes your attitude. Your attitude helps you develop like that positive self-image in yourself. And so going through what I faced, yeah, it was difficult, but I'm so grateful that I had mentors and people around me that were able to pour into me, right? Water that seed instead of doing the opposite, which so many people are faced with. Because you would, if you ever do like prison outreach or homeless outreach, you literally hear stories from these personal stories from these people, and they're like second, third generation homeless, second, third generation in prison. Like why? Because these men are like, my mom said I'm gonna be just like my dad. I remember my grandma used to say I'll be just like my dad. Like they literally spoke that into existence over these, you know, these people's lives. And so you kind of set those people up for failure, but there's still hope for them as well. So
Right. And especially
we're
when
giving
you're
some long
young.
answers today.
No, man. It's funny too, because it's I never feel as off my game as, you know, when I'm with someone like you, especially because like our first conversation was heavy.
Yeah.
It was really heavy. And I listened to it, and, you know, just like talking to you, it's like you're a powerful man. And like you were saying, not a good communicator earlier. I was like, I didn't even mean to object, but something inside me was just like, no, man, because you not only have you had these experiences, but you can communicate so many different things about them already. And like you say, you don't know sometimes when you're a kid. You don't know whether you're in a good situation or a bad situation, and especially if you're in a bad situation, you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you'll make it out of this week, this month. You don't know what this means. Why, you know, did I do something wrong? This, you know, million different thoughts run through your head. So you don't know. So to hear from someone like you who has the power to connect with people and like bring, like I come across videos of you on Facebook sometimes, you know, video I've watched probably 5-6 times now. But I'll watch it every time. It's 6 minutes long. Who watches a 6-minute long video on Facebook? You know, who commits to that?
Yeah.
But you can't replace, I don't know, whatever it is you have. So, you know, I appreciate the long answers, and that's why I have you here. And
of course,
you know, it means a lot that you would come on. And I think not enough people get their flowers in the right moments, and you deserve it, man. Like,
man, appreciate that.
You deserve it more than I can say. So shout out
and
to you.
And that's why I'm here, because you deserve it too. You're doing incredible work, for real.
Man, and to have you start off the 200th episode too, I want to thank you again for that. That was an honor. I've gotten a lot of messages from that. A lot of people really enjoyed that. So thank you again. Good. Something else in 2020 that I was really proud to see was you at these events, the protests, the rallies. And that was a different side of you that I hadn't seen before necessarily.
Yep.
And just to watch you, it gives me goosebumps in a different way than that other 6-minute video when you're speaking at an inside event where people are having dinner kind of thing.
Yep.
And the cadence of it, the emotion behind it, the way it's a totally different muscle than the speaking you've done in other places from what I see it. So, you know, what was that like for you? You know, how did you do the first one? It's a big question, but
yeah, definitely a big question. For me, just understanding. I've always known my lane, and I've always known just how I need to move to impact, right? And that goes back to just knowing my gift and knowing my purpose. But part of what I do is communicate, and people identify me as a communicator, motivational speaker, inspirational speaker, whatever it is. And so when some of the first protests began to happen here in Tacoma, I received a couple calls from different folks. And of course, just trying to figure out and understanding and knowing like the process behind some of the protests, but then also understanding our local politicians and our council members and being friends with like the mayor and some of the council members. So trying to respect both sides. And, you know, I was raised by a police officer. And so just there's so many different things going around and going through my head. Like, one, how do I support all of them in one? And so a lot of emotion in the cadence and the delivery and even the messages that you heard from some of the protests were really me trying to respect everyone that has impacted my life, but then really trying to bring people together, right? And that's always been my lane. And so showing up, like, I don't want to change and be someone else that I'm not at the protest. I believe they invited me to speak at the largest protest we had here, like probably 7,000 people showed up at this park. And I remember standing up on this table, and you can't even see the back of the crowd. And here I am with this like megaphone talking about my daughter, talking about family, things that like I'm talking about on the podcast. My message doesn't change. Like, my story doesn't change based on the arena. Like, that same inspiration, that same hope, the same love, me trying to connect with people, sharing my story is always going to be the same. That's what I'm always going to share. And so for me, and that's why I believe and then there was a lot more requests that came in, and I had to say no to a lot of them. One, because then I knew, like, I have to show up in the moment to be there for my people. But great leaders they don't have followers. I believe great leaders really develop leaders, if that makes sense. So great leaders develop leaders. And that's what I try to do in my life. Like, I don't want to just go because it's a popular thing to do, because it gets likes on social media. Like, I'm trying to live for legacy, like legacy over likes. I'm trying to impact leaders, not followers. I'm trying to like encourage these like followers to, like you're a leader. I want to pull that out of you. I believe everyone is a leader in some capacity, whether that be you're leading your own life or whatever it is. And so for me, like, my lane is to mentor and guide and equip and coach and pull out leaders and young people. And so although I showed up, I knew it wasn't my lane. So I knew I wasn't going to show up to every protest. They invited me to a lot of them, but I said, hey, I've been like, this is my fight. We all need to know like what our voice is in the fight. We all need to know our lane in the fight, and then collectively keep coming together. And that's how we win the fight. Like any great team I've ever been on, football, that whatever it is, that's how we won those championships. Because you hear it all the time, basketball, hoop, like know your role, and like be
in
the
your
best
role.
You know what I mean? Exactly. And so for me, I take that same approach. A lot of sport analogies that I grew up with, I literally take that same approach into my life. Like, I just want to be a star in my role. But sometimes even the guy who gets a lot of rebounds, he might be called on to like hit the game winning shot. He might be called on to go get the double double. And so it's the same as, to me, like, I'm not your leading activist in this city, but I might be called on because maybe I can communicate the message a lot better than the leading activist. And so I understand like the magnitude of like the call in my life. And that's all that was this summer. And then the emotion came from me trying to just really not comprehend my story, but really project and articulate my story in a way that people knew like what I stood for. So.
And for you personally, like, it's something I don't think you probably talk about a lot, but like, how did it make you feel to be there, to speak? Is it a different feeling than you got in other speaking events? Like, how were you received? All of that.
Man, so the funny thing is, it just reminded me, I didn't even get invited to speak at the first one. So I'm literally there because there were a lot of young people that organized the protests here in Tacoma. I don't know about other cities, but here in Tacoma, Washington, it was like high school students, middle school students. And these are kids that I knew, college students, right? And so I just literally want to go to this first one to support and just be there and just walk and experience it, right? And so they marched maybe like 4 miles down to this park, and this was the first one. I'm like literally standing in the back, kind of head down, just paying attention and just kind of taking it all in. Obviously very emotional, some tears, a lot of emotion behind it. And someone noticed me in the back and was like, man, you have to go speak. I'm like, oh, no. Like, we don't, they don't need speakers. And then someone went to the front. I was like, hey, John is here. Like, Dr. Gangs is in the back. Like, can he speak? And they're like, oh, of course. So they called me up to the front. And so that's how the first one happened. So because I think people sometimes they don't know, like, does he care too much about his reputation to show up? Like, some of them were like, we had really good ones here in Tacoma. I don't know. I can't say like it's a protest. So I think good came from them. And there was I could say there was peace in protest here in Tacoma. And so I think people just thought like, maybe he cares too much about like his business or his reputation or his image to, so they really didn't ask at first. But I think when they saw me there and then knew like, this is what I do, they invited me up to the front. And the first thing I talked about my daughter, I just said, every day with my daughter, I do these affirmation statements. That was like the first speech. I put it on my social media. I kind of talked through that process. And then I talked about this idea of, one, learning how to lead your own family before you can go out and lead others. And just that's why I try to do that like in my life, right? And then also helping my daughter shape her own beliefs about herself, because the systems in place might always be there. Racism is going to be here until there's going to be evil, and that's what every type of evil. There's going to be evil in the world. And so for me, I really just talked about what my priority, my goal is to really help my daughter shape her beliefs about herself. Literally everything we just talked about. I just kind of talked about that within like 4 minutes, and then the crowd like erupted, and I was like, this is great. And then from that one, someone was like, hey, what are you doing on Saturday? We have another protest. Can you come? And then from that one, at that protest, exchanged a few numbers. And it's like, hey, we're planning the big one. And then the last one I did was Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm.
So June 19th, there were 3 or 4 different event type protest events going on. I got invited to 3 out of the 4, and I went to 2 of them. And I thought, I think my job is done. I feel like,
where were those on Juneteenth, by the way? Because I feel like I was chasing you around trying to figure out which one that was at.
Yeah,
was it in Tacoma?
Yep, Tacoma.
Okay.
Yep, one was like more so like Parkland, and then one was like in the heart of Tacoma.
Gotcha.
Yep, and so then after that, I just figured, I felt I didn't like my job's not done. I want to rephrase that. My job's not done, but in like that season was up, if that makes sense.
Like you said, it was powerful. The marching was something I'd never experienced before. Like that, marching like that. I've been a part of, there had been marches in Seattle before, but not to the magnitude that it was. And I didn't realize how powerful that would be. Just experiencing it as me, as a person with my family and my brothers, like marching, like you feel kind of a lot closer with everybody after that, the people that are out there. Like 2020 has been like I've learned a lot overall, just about myself, about people. And so, have you learned, what would you say the number one thing you've learned is? Maybe it could be about yourself, about people in 2020. Cause that's quite the loaded question, but
yeah, there's so much I learned about. One, I realized that I love spending time with my family even more. And honestly, I realized that although it's easy to say, but hard to like put action behind different things. And so for me, although it's easy for me to say, I want to make my family a priority, but when you're forced to be home with your family, you kind of realize and you're able to reevaluate how things are kind of going, right? And so for me, it's taking some of those hard self-assessments of myself and just understanding maybe I wasn't moving the best way. Maybe the direction I was headed was going against like my own personal mission. And so one of the hardest and best things I've learned was that, one, like, your mission is your most important thing. Stick to it. And so for me, I realized that in order for me to be everything that I was created to be, I literally have to stick to my mission, and that's family. Because I feel so much joy, like less pressure, business and stuff I do with the city. Everything's going extremely well, and it's a direct correlation of my relationship, with my family. So that's been in a nutshell, that's probably been the hardest lesson and the best for sure of this year.
It's like you've evolved to that, because I'm sure a lot of people in the same situation maybe wouldn't, no fault to them, put in the same work that you still put in for your dream. And, I know you're up early. What time do you get up in the morning?
I have my alarm set for 4:13.
4:13.
Yeah.
And then we've texted back and forth pretty late at night too. And I was just like, am I ruining this man's night?
No.
How much sleep are you getting?
So some night, like today, I woke up early and did some stuff. So I was up early at 4:15. Wow. I was able to kind of do like some of my normal just routine. And then I took a quick like 45-minute nap.
Okay.
So some days I might get up and take a quick nap, and then, cause it's so random, especially with the little one. And then my wife, she's turned to like this dope entrepreneur. So she's helping me with a lot of stuff and doing her own thing. Then we have like business together. So now she's up late, and it was funny. Like some of the first few nights she stayed up late, I'm just like kind of grinding. She's like, it's cool to kind of see like this is just you in your zone, like up at like 2 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Just kind of grinding. Then I'm up, like I have some hard goals this year, really, to just have a rhythm to like get back in shape, set myself up for greatness in that regard, and just different things, right? And in order for me to be the best, and it won't always be like this, but you always hear stories of people who made that sacrifice for 2-3 years to where it's like less sleep. Because I'm not gonna say it's like the best thing. Some people like they will tell you never sleep, I'm like, that's not healthy. My
Mhm.
doctor even told me, like, right. And so I don't want this to be for a forever thing, right?
Uh-huh.
Eventually, I do want to start going to sleep earlier, like 9:30. But
Yeah.
that waking up at 4:13, that's 1 Philippians 4:13 is a Bible verse. But then it's also the same time the hospital called and said my father had passed away.
Mm.
And so it's just a reminder, like that relationship meant so much to me with my father. And so for me, it's just a reminder to like life is precious.
Mm-hmm.
And like go out and be great because you don't have as much time as you think. So
Mm-hmm. Those words hit different and at different points in people's lives. Like
yeah,
before you really feel the weight of that, it's just another saying, but when you feel the weight of it and you understand it, it puts a lot of things in perspective, and it impacts your life to a big extent of how you treat people.
yeah,
So man, I know you would say it's going to be with your family. You work very hard. You put a lot in. But how do you relax? What specifically are you doing? Is there a show that has been like, what's your refueling? Is it like a game that you play with your daughter? Is it with,
yeah.
like you
That's a
guys
good
play
question.
house? Is there
That's
any
a good
house
question.
going on?
Not yet,
No.
but she
Okay.
does. We play like with her dinosaurs. She loves
Okay.
dinosaurs. She says, "Dad, will you play with me?" I'm like,
Okay.
"Yeah, I got you."
Little
And we play. Well,
paleontologist.
yeah, we play with her dinosaurs. She's hilarious, man. And we love to eat. Like we love to eat like family meals together. Last night, my wife she cooked some spaghetti, and I look over at my daughter. Her bowl's like gone. She's only 2.5. And typically, I say like when she eats fast or she eats our food, I say, "Baby, you crushed it." I looked at her, I said, "Whoa, I said you ate that food fast." She said, "Dad, I crushed it." And so
Crushed
that
it. I love it.
that's fun for me, man. And then also I post a lot of stairs, me at stairs.
Mhm.
It's not always for the workout. Oftentimes I go and just kind of walk the stairs. That's been therapeutic for me. I started running stairs when I was 11 years old. And it was an outlet for me. And so it's still that place. I like to say it was my first sanctuary.
Mm.
And so for me, it's still a place I go as an outlet to kind of clear my mind, think of new ideas, think of new speeches, think about business, think about my family. And so it's something I implement almost daily, right? In the whether that be like walking the stairs or maybe just like on a walk. I just try to get outside because that was an outlet for me. So that's
Mhm.
what I do to definitely refill. Just one of the many things.
Right. No, it makes me think too, because, we've talked about it a lot. You've gone through a lot of things. And with that, usually, that can affect people in different ways, whether it be anxiety or PTSD or this or that, or whatever you want to call it. So how much of the things you do are like preventative versus at this point in your life, preventative versus like therapeutic, like treating the symptoms kind of thing, if that's not
Yeah.
too personal of a question.
No. So I think of almost everything I do is probably preventative, right? And that's just my mindset. And I think you grow to that where you come from a place to where it's playing football and playing hoop growing up, you like injury will force you to go to the physical therapist or maybe you have surgery and then you do all these things to recover. And once you get recovered, there's always something. I remember like I dislocated my elbow, right? Or I had a bad shoulder injury. I would learn something new to help prevent that from happening again. Something I wasn't doing before, but it was something a new exercise I just implement. And I still do some of those things until this day, right? And not that I think I'm gonna get a shoulder injury because no one's hitting me. I'm not running into people
You need
anymore.
some pads.
But it's become habit. So even for me, stairs were like in the response to some of the chaos. And now it just helps me literally respond to the chaos when it happens, because it's going to happen. Adversity is going to happen a lot differently. And that's leadership. That's what successful people do, right? They have success isn't about like how hard you work. Success is about the system that you can implement in your life, right? Success is all about systems. And so for me, that's just part of my system, even this year. And I feel like completely healed and I feel at peace. But something I've never had counseling, and just knowing my story. And for the listeners, if you haven't heard my story, please go listen. I'm on the podcast last year, about a year ago. So I encourage you to listen to it.
Please listen to that podcast.
Yeah.
Anything, even if you've told it on a different podcast, go listen because it's worth it. But please continue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Just coming from where I came from, like I should have had counseling. at an early age, and I never had counseling, and so for me, like just going through therapy this year, like I really was able to sit back. I'm like, what can I do? I'm always trying to get ahead. I'm thinking like 10 steps ahead. Like because even when my dad died, that was extremely hard. Being able to rekindle that relationship with him, forgiving him for kind of walking out, and then having that relationship with him, and then him passing away at the time that he did and how he did was hurtful, and it hurt, and it caused me to really think, like, man, could I go there? Like, could I go back to those dark places I was like as a kid? You know what I mean? I really had to think about some of those things. And I think, and those are questions that leaders don't ask themselves. And that's why, and this is heavy, but just if I could just in full transparency, you typically you don't see it, but so many like pastors and leaders commit suicide. And I think we're seeing some of that right now because they never understood that. Like who do your pastors and your leaders go to when they're hurting, right? And it's a lesson I learned from some of my greatest mentors in my life. Like if your mentor don't have a mentor, you have the wrong mentor. Right? If your coach don't have a coach, you have the wrong coach. If your pastor don't have a pastor, you have the wrong pastor. You have to go to people who are going to people to fill them, who are going to people to fill them, and that's life. That's how we do life together. We're better together. And so for me this year, that's something I'm just always trying to implement in that area. It's great to have mentors and coaches, but now what about therapy? And my first question to my therapist, like, do you have a therapist? Yes, I do. Great. You're the one. You don't need to know anything else? Nope. I was like, I don't have any like pressing issues. I just want to talk through things and just try it out, and we'll just go from there. So,
wow, man. And shout out to you for doing it. Cause it's like you said, can I go back there? Can I open up that box? Cause not to project, but it's like, you build up walls to be able to go through the things that you went through as a young person and make it through. And there's defense mechanism, this and that, and all the things you want to say, but to reach back in there, open that box up, flip the lid open and say, let's go back into it. It's heavy. It's not easy at all. And people advise a lot of times is go to therapy, but they should, like even hearing you talk about that, because in some ways, I'm sure people see you like you're invincible. You're on stage, you speak very well, you've made it through your things, but you've never, you're not through those things. Those have shaped you to be who you are.
Yep.
And it's, intertwined and everything like that. Yep. But to know that your leaders struggle too is so important for kids, because they're like, man, I must not be a leader because I struggle. No, not at all. Not at all. It's just what you do with your struggles, and you're 100%, 1,000% a perfect example of that. So,
yeah, and that's why it's so important. I think I talked to you about this a while back, but like I wrote this journal like / book 30 Days on Purpose, and for me, I'm going to publish it sometime next year. But for me, it's really about helping people identify their systems and having systems to really fill their cup, and understanding we all go through something. Right? Life isn't easy for anyone. But the difference between the good and the great, they learn how to use that pain for the purpose. They learn how to turn that pain into a promise. They learn how to understand like the mess is meant to be a message, and then they begin to share their story to connect. Our stories are so, and I could go on and on about like the power story, but I believe everything is birthed from me just understanding myself and being able to articulate like my story with myself and with others. And that's opened up the most doors for me. So
It's genuine, man. It's genuine. I'm looking at that Push Love sweatshirt you got on there. It's genuine. The Push Love hat is genuine, man. So I love it. I'm hyped to have you on in such a crazy year, and to reflect on it, and to just get your vibes and get your word out there on this podcast, cleanse people a little bit here before we go into a new year. So, man, any final words, anything that you'd just like to end on? What's in your heart right now?
Man, I've been talking a lot today about gifting and just what it means to have a gift. That's really been on my heart lately, because I believe everything is birthed from our gift, right? And I think on the podcast last year, I talked about this idea of a seed and the difference. A seed, like the seed has more power when it's in soil opposed to a seed being on a windowsill, right? It has no power on a windowsill. It's still a seed, right? it still has power, but it's not going to be birthed on that windowsill, right? It has to go into soil, and then that tree grows, and from that tree you have fruit. And what I really been thinking about this year, and what I've been listening to different speakers, I realized that although like this seed grows, we're all born with a seed. It grows into this tree, and this tree begins to bear fruit. The tree doesn't benefit from its fruit. And what I realized more so this year, the gift that I have is not for me. The gift I have is for others. The fruit that I have is literally for others. And I think the more people that can understand that and realize that, the more we all grow. It's like an abundance mentality. And so that's been pressing on my heart, right? So your gift to facilitate and do these podcasts, it's not necessarily for you. It's to provide a platform for others to go back to what's been on my heart gift to share their stories, right? And so for me, I just want to encourage folks who are listening, especially some of your hoopers and athletes that listen to this. Each of you have a gift, and your gift, I just want to encourage you, like, it's not basketball. You're good at basketball, but even when you go to the NBA, let's be optimistic, or you're in the NBA right now, I think Jamal Crawford is like a god. You know what I mean? To play as long as he played. I want people to know that's rare. Like, he's taking care of his body, and he's like, God has blessed him in that regard.
2 long careers.
But that's not normal. And so I just want to encourage people, like, one, find your gift and find your purpose, because if you don't, after sports, you're going to struggle with, and I see it all the time. I went through like a phase of it. I see it with my friends when like the NFL's over, when college is over, they struggle with kind of finding their purpose and finding their why, because it was wrapped in sports. So I want to encourage y'all, while you're playing right now, find your gift, and then it's going to be easy to identify that gift if the gift is a service to others. And then the second thing, learn how to share your story, learn how to communicate. That's been the greatest blessing in my life. And I'll close with this. Maya Angelou once said, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And I honestly think a lot of times why people are hurting, a lot of times why we're not connecting with each other, because we just don't know. So going back to the beginning to bring it full cycle, knowledge and fear. Like, I don't fear you, Jeremy, because I know you. I took time to get to know you. You don't fear me because you have taken time to get to know me. You have knowledge of me. I have knowledge of you. And so I encourage folks, one, find that gift, share your story, with the hope of sharing yourself with others to get rid of the fear.
Dr. John Gaines, ladies and gentlemen, on the Jeremy Mills podcast. There's not much more to be said after that. Like you said, man, it's tell your story. Just to get it out. Sometimes that stuff is getting stale inside of you. You need to get it out. Like your exercise, and your blood needs to move around. You need to get refreshed. You never know how good you can feel after. So if you don't already follow Dr. John Gaines, how can they follow you?
Push Gangs on every platform. That's just PUSHGAINES. Push Gangs, Instagram, Twitter. I've been posting every day on TikTok recently.
Yes. I forgot. That's what I was going to ask you about. You got your wife a car, and I saw it on TikTok. That made I don't remember what time of year that was, but made that season.
Yeah. So that was right when baby girl was born.
Wow.
And her brother just happened to be, it wasn't like staged to record. I just was like, yo, like her engine blew out, and we're like in a position. I'm like, and for me, I'm not frugal, but you grow up certain ways and it's like, okay, what are we going to do? Like, how do we get this fixed? I was thinking like, hold on, we have some money in the bank. I was like, I'm just going to call around. We're just going to get a new car. We need an SUV. We have a baby. And so called around, went to a dealership, got her a car. So it was planned, but it wasn't like planned. Her brother happened to be there. I called and said, hey, you got to record this. I'm about to come home with a car. He's like, what? Like, yeah. So, yep. And I posted that on TikTok.
It was great. It was so great. You know, one of those classic things you see reposted on the, not Bleacher Report, but whatever your equivalent of that is.
Yeah.
So it was great, man. Follow Dr. Gaines. And again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you in every way. I respect you. I look up to you. And I look forward to the next time that we'll have a conversation.
Of course. Thank you, brother. I look forward to it. Let's do it. Let's make this an annual at the end of the year type thing.
Man, absolutely. At least. So Dr. John
Yeah.
Gaines, appreciate you.
All right, brother. Peace.